Hi, I'm Cindi McGee, and you're watching Polymer Clay TV. Today's pattern to polymer slab is inspired by this alamy stock photo image that I found online. To match the colors for the background squares, I'm using a combination of clays. I'm using Sculpey Soufflé, and this is sea glass, I believe, and I'm using Sculpey Soufflé in pumpkin. I used Primo Sculpey purple and mixed in a little alizarin crimson to darken it, and Spanish olive with a little burnt umber mixed in. After I blended the two shades, the green and the sort of plum purple, I rolled all the clay through my Atlas machine on a setting number 3. Then I'm using a square cutter. You can use whatever size you have or just hand cut your squares, to cut several squares from each of the different colors of clay. You can use any color you'd like for the backing sheet. I'm using some Primo Sculpey accents, and this is the gold glitter that I conditioned and rolled to a setting number 3 to make the base sheet. I used the original inspiration photo to determine the placement of my colors and just began adding those squares adjacent to each other on the background sheet. Cover the entire sheet this way. Once I had all my squares in place, I used my roller to just gently roll over the surface and make sure they were lying flat before I began silk screening. The first silk screen I'm going to use is Flower Coin 1, and this is from CreateAlong.com, and I'm going to be using this flower that looks like a mum. Place it with the boldly colored side down. Some of the screens are orange, some are turquoise, but you want to put the colored side down. And I like to give it a little roll with my roller just to make sure it's going to stay in place before I add my paint. I'm going to begin by silk screening the large mum type flower with some Deco Art Americana, and this is Sour Apple Green. I silk screened this flower several times over the surface, allowing some to overhang the edges here and there. And then go ahead and wash your silk screen right away and let the paint dry on the clay. For the next flower, I'm using the center flower on this Garden Flowers silk screen from Create Along. It's a mum. It's the same mum as on that original silk screen, but it's a little bit smaller, so it's perfect to mimic the original pattern that I found. Again, place it with the colored side down. I like to give it a little roll. And then this time I'm silk screening with some Deco Art Americana multi-surface satin, and this is Chick. It's a nice pale yellow. Silk screen several of those over the surface. Let them overlap those green ones here and there and extend off a bit too. Now I've let all the paint dry, and I'm going to go back and add some of the soft coloring to the yellow flowers. And to do that, I'm using my pan pastels. I have a small applicator that I'm going to use with this pale yellow shade first and add it to the petals on the yellow flowers. Then I came back and used some blue. This is ultramarine blue shade, but any shade of blue would work, and a different applicator, and added just a very light touch around that center of the flower, around the center. I made a ring basically around the center, again mimicking that original pattern that inspired the veneer. Next, I added the soft reddish pink shade, and I'm using permanent red tint for that, but any pale reddish pink shade would work. And again, a very light touch in the center of the flowers. And lastly, I'm using permanent red and a really tiny applicator to just add some very small touches of that brighter red in the center. And I used my finger to sort of smudge them and soften them a bit. For the smallest flowers, I'm going to use a small floral stamp that I have and some white acrylic paint. And I'm just going to dab a little paint onto that stamp and then stamp it here and there over the surface, allowing it to overlap. If you had a smaller silkscreen floral that you wanted to use, you can use that. It's really up to you. This is just going to give us that effect of the smaller white flowers. Once all of the paint was dry, it was time to go ahead and start making my jewelry components. And I'm using my tribal shells clay cutters from Create Along to cut several larger shells for pendants and some smaller shells for earrings. And I'm also going to cut some small circles and some small ovals from the scrap areas to make additional sets of earrings. Here are my finished jewelry pieces. I did take some DecoArt metallic luster in gold and used my finger to add it around the outer edges of each of the elements, and then just added all of my jewelry components to finish the jewelry collection. For more inspiration, join our Polymer Clay Tribe Facebook page. Over 18,000 members sharing projects every day. For lots more creative polymer clay ideas, visit the Polymer Clay TV blog.